amazing Australians and their lives. You're tuned to Lots to Chat About with Rosemary Peterswald.
Hello and welcome, listeners. Now, if you live in the city, your dog or cat gets ill or sick or injured, you can usually find a caring vet to take it to. But what if you are miles and miles away in the Outback, Australia, and your horse or cow suddenly becomes unwell? Or it might be a beloved family pet which could have been bitten by a snake or such. Well, Dr. Campbell Costello is the man you would call. And lo and behold, a welcome sight of an Outback and Veterinary Services plane may appear out of the sky, and Campbell Costello, otherwise known as Cozy, is there to help, as he has done in many other parts of the world, including Afghanistan, South Africa, and southeast Pakistan. He has competed in the Mongol Derby, a 1,000-kilometre horse race, the longest horse race, where he returns regularly as one of the senior veterinarians, as he does in Alaska for the annual dog sled race. Welcome, Campbell.
G'day, Rosemary. G'day, listeners. Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. Now, Campbell, gosh, wow, doing my research for this program, I mean, I've been bowled over by what you have achieved and where you've been, etc. But tell us, where did it all start? I mean, was it your childhood on a remote cattle station outside Charters Towers?
Yeah, as you previously noted, I was born and raised on a cattle property outside of Charters Towers. I did school there, so all of our schooling was via mail and a radio.
Right.
And my mother and governesses, etc., taught myself and my siblings. I think that predisposed me to choosing a career in some kind of animal agriculture capacity. But if I were to go back and talk to my younger self in the classroom of a hissing radio, in the outback of northern Queensland, that hey, one day you'll get a doctor prefix and travel the world.
Yeah.
I may not have believed you, but I think, my upbringing definitely cemented a career choice in veterinary medicine,
Right.
or something to that sort of niche.
Yes.
And then, as you previously noted, I think my huge catalyst to looking abroad was Mongolia.
Right. Now, Campbell, you were the eldest child, and you did, I mean, I think it'd be fair to say, you had a lot of responsibility earlier on, didn't you?
Yeah, I think that's pretty representative of, a lot of bush kids. At a young age, I was the eldest of 4 children. My family had 130,000 acre property outside of Charters Towers. And in my younger days, we had a lot of really bad drought in northern Queensland. So not only were you part of the family unit, you'd keep the house clean, you'd look after animals, other chores, you'd work with the cowboys, the ringers and the stock camps as well. Even when mum was, pregnant with my sisters, you'd sort of walk alongside, like a little fox terrier and help pick things up or help with chores. So I think there's a lot of responsibility and accountability at a young age for a lot of, bush kids. And even though you might be young,
Yes.
and not even a teenager yet, there is, huge tasks and independence and cognitive development at a young age, whether that's driving a car, riding a horse, or checking fences. So,
right.
Yeah.
Because your father was away quite a bit, wasn't he?
Yeah, I remember, I think it was 1993, we were deep in drought. I still remember it clear as day. I was riding my horse, Kerry, a chestnut mare at the time. She wouldn't be my favorite horse. And she bucked me off and I shattered my nose.
Oh.
And we had booked every single road train in the Charters Towers area to truck pretty well all of our livestock, thousands of livestock, to adjustment in central Queensland.
All right.
I remember sitting in the front of a Land Cruiser, in 40-degree heat, pouring a cup of water down one nostril and out the other to blow all the blood clots out, because Dad was, we were away, we were up the paddock,
Right.
And we were so far away from a hospital
Yes.
that, yeah, later on that day after we'd loaded all the road trains, yeah, I got taken to the hospital to see if I was x-rayed, and then Dad literally rolled a swag, packed a bag, and he went away. And that was pre-mobile phones where,
Of
you know,
course.
we might not hear for him for
Yes.
weeks and weeks. So yeah, quite a frontier upbringing, that's for sure.
You were the man of the house for quite a while. But then, of course, Campbell, you went to James Cook University. What made you? I mean, I know we've sort of said your love of animals and whatever there, but what age were you when you sort of really decided I am going to be a vet?
Um, well, I sort of, yeah, it was reasonably just sort of fell into it. Like it was one of the many vocations I'd considered. I was thinking of being a pilot, a helicopter pilot, you know, with mustering and bush work. I'd applied for an apprenticeship to be a boilermaker in Mount Isa because I
Right.
did a lot of welding and metal work on the cattle property. James Cook University had just launched their undergraduate veterinary program for the first time ever,
In
and
Townsville.
they were looking correct, and they had applications. They really wanted bush kids and regional kids to apply.
Right.
I never thought that I'd done well at academia, and I've been very lucky to go to boarding school for my last 2 years in Brisbane.
All right.
But I did not get the marks that would have got me into the traditional veterinary colleges, such in Brisbane, Sydney, or Melbourne.
Yes.
So I applied for James Cook University. My interviews went really well, and somehow I convinced them that I was a great punter for their veterinary science program. So we were the inaugural year of veterinary medicine that James Cook University in Townsville had ever produced,
All
and I
right.
graduated in 2010. Yep, we
Right.
were the guinea pigs and the first ones out ever.
Oh, right. Well, good on them for having that course. But your father and grandfather, of course, were pilots. Is that one of the reasons decided, that you would become a pilot too?
Correct. So I think aviation has always been a big part of the Outback. And my family, on both of my mother and my father's side, both my grandfathers were bush pilots.
Yes.
I've got my grandfather's pilot license on the wall here in Townsville.
Oh,
That
really?
was
Yeah.
back in the early 60s. Yeah,
Yes.
he bought a Cessna 182 in Brisbane, and I believe the story went that he had to go and pick it up, and he
Yes.
turned up and said, "Oh, I'm ready to get my plane." And they said, "Oh, mate, you need a pilot's license." So I was like, "Oh, crap, well, I better do it." So he smashed out his pilot's license and
Right.
flew the plane back from southeast Queensland to northern Queensland.
Oh, right. Right.
Yeah.
And
So
yeah, and your father as well.
correct. So Dad had tried when he was younger to finish his pilot's license, but droughts, debt with the cattle properties, and then a family coming along sort of got in the way. But he
Yes.
eventually got it sorted. At that point, we were running multiple cattle properties, and it was just my parents and I when I took my gap year off from boarding school between school and university.
Yes.
So we were running about a quarter of a million acres, just the three of us, and checking all the windmills and
Right.
pumps and dams and watering points in a
Yes.
vehicle terrestrially. That could take 3 days, whereas Dad in his small bush plane could fly them in a couple of hours. And if there was a problem that was highlighted, we could directly go to that watering point and fix it. So
A
when
great.
floods were on or other kind of pinch points that come with driving somewhere in the bush,
Mhm.
yeah, Dad's plane really opened up a whole new world. And I was lucky that at a young age we got exposed to aviation, and always been fascinated with helicopters and aeroplanes.
It's a real. I mean, it's a step forward. A horse or a motorbike is not going to do it, is it? Whereas, as you said, the plane has made such a huge difference. But now, Campbell, where did the name Cozy come from?
So my nickname. I've gone to multiple rugby presentations, or even when I graduated veterinary science, and they said, Dr. Campbell Morris Costello, Bachelor of Veterinary Science, come on down. Even some of my own classmates, like who the hell's this bloke?
Yeah.
Everyone knew me as Cozzy or
Oh, Cozy.
Cozy.
Yeah. Okay.
My phonetics, depending on which part of Australia you come from. But
Right.
my last name's Costello, so Costello has always been shortened to Cozzy. If you yelled that name out in the homestead, literally my entire family would probably prick their ear.
Right.
But yeah, my father and I believe my grandfather were all called that. So it's just always been a name that's stuck. And I've had girlfriends even were calling me Campbell. They just said, it just doesn't sound right. I've always known you as Cozzy.
Oh,
So yeah.
oh, that's wonderful. Campbell, what's the area now? I mean, we'll get in later to all the overseas areas that you have worked in, but what is the main area that you work in now?
The main area that I'm working in now is probably more Queensland.
Yes.
I know with COVID and certain other things, that's really been a changing, sort of climate for the veterinary industry over the last couple of years. I was servicing, at one stage, the aeroplane and we were servicing, an area from Townsville, Mount Isa, Tennant Creek, Alice Springs, Longreach. I was servicing Dubbo for a very long time.
All right. Yeah.
And I used to go as far as Albury, Wodonga,
Wow.
right down on the New South Wales Victorian border. It's just, it's becoming increasingly difficult to find veterinarians in Australia as well as skilled labour.
Right.
I think, certain jobs, tertiary education, just with student loans and other challenges. I think young Australians are really questioning, well, why would I bother, getting a lot of veterinary school debt
Yes.
for a job that doesn't really pay well, but it's very expensive for the population to access, and that can maybe be discussed later,
Right.
without getting Medicare or subsidies such as the Royal Flying Doctor.
Yes.
It's really, really gutted, the veterinary industry in the bush, and hence why I
Right.
used to travel such large distances to help,
Yes.
veterinary clinics stay open. We have towns like, Alice Springs or Longreach, for example, that struggle to have a full-time vet.
Right. Well, certainly something that AI can't take over, isn't it? But Campbell, do you have an office, or do you mostly sort of work out of your plane or the car?
No, I don't own a bricks and mortar clinic.
Yes.
Once again, with red tape and costs and debt, it's really hard I've been practicing for 16 years now.
Yeah.
And it's really difficult for, veterinarians to get an office or a bricks and mortar clinic. The cost of things, back in the day, we had, free student loans, and you could just open a veterinary clinic up in your garage, and
Yes.
that was totally fine. But over the years, that's evolved, and a basic clinic might cost you, $500,000 to over $1 million, depending on what
Right.
kind of services
Yes.
that you do, and that's really quite challenging. So for me, I just work out of my aeroplane. Or my car, and
Yes.
sort of a gun for hire per se, and do what we call locum, so
Right.
sort of a casual vet.
You go to where
That
you're
come-
wanted, not necessarily the other way around, which I think is just
Correct.
absolutely really, really wonderful. You work a lot, Campbell, with the Indigenous community, so that must be very rewarding.
It can be, yeah,
Or-
definitely, and I think, as cliche as it sounds, being a veterinarian in these communities, you can, like, just very small veterinary interventions.
Yes.
And I've got to be careful using that word, but can really not only change, animal health, but environmental and human. We use, there's a term we use, the One Health paradigm, where there's a Venn diagram and all of those different areas sort of combine as one. And I guess we've had a lot of funding cuts, and a lot of things have changed, and
Right.
it's been really hard for me to service those.
Yes.
As a subcontractor, those Indigenous communities, but just by giving companion animals any parasitical treatments,
Right.
for ticks, worms, fleas, you can drastically change, human health outcomes in the bush, where that cohabitation between animals and humans is quite tight.
Right.
And I think, if you've got an Indigenous person, for example, that is, genetically predisposed to having, renal disease,
Yes.
well, where I don't know how many times I've gone to a bush house
Yeah.
and, young kids have answered the door grey and febrile, with a temperature and tick bites all over them because they sleep in a house with animals that aren't treated,
Right.
and they get a huge blood infection that can
Yes.
get into their kidneys, and predispose that problem. Like, I've heard and seen stories of, teenagers or Indigenous folk in the early 20s, considering dialysis.
Yes.
And I think some people go, oh, it's alcohol,
Yes.
and it's like, no, I think it's, dietary challenges in the bush, but if you're getting bitten by parasites,
Yes.
and having huge blood infections, well, that causes havoc on your kidneys. And
Exactly.
I think, it's been a huge argument, for people to go, if you invest in your veterinary skills,
Yes.
that can actually be cheaper on the taxpayer than having to, offer huge public health programs. The savings, that pragmatic medicine is much more rewarding versus reactive.
Absolutely. Now, you're listening to Lots to Chat About. My guest today is Dr. Campbell Costello of the Outback and Airborne Veterinary Service. Now, Campbell, I believe you helped China in their quest for safe and healthy dairy and beef, part of, some of your overseas works.
Yeah, correct. China, back, sort of early, 2013 onwards, we're investing huge amounts of money in cattle embryos, in the agricultural programs, for safe and reliable dairy products for their people. We saw, there used to be per head quotas on Chinese nationals coming to New Zealand or Australia buying baby formula. Baby formula was a huge one, as the one child policy got lifted, more people are having children, but both the parents had to work, and they were unable to breastfeed. So, during that explosion, there were nationals that would fly, daily between, China, New Zealand, or China and Australia, buy the entirety of their checked-in baggage with baby formula and fly it back to their country and sell it on the black market at quite a profit. China saw that this was a problem, so they said, well, why don't we start investing in our own dairy? So we would do a lot of the biosecurity here in Australia, and I would travel with livestock abroad, either by plane or by boat, and then help, with the construction of farms, and also just that husbandry and that sort of more up-to-date, veterinary consultancy. We did that in Sri Lanka as well. Sri Lanka came out of a 30-year civil war, and they constructed huge dairies over there to get more food security, as well as other areas in Southeast Asia, even Russia, Kazakhstan, a lot of obscure countries where, those countries would look to Australia because of our high regard for livestock in the world.
Yeah. Tell me about the Mongolian Derby, and how you got involved. It's the longest horse race. I think when I initially contacted you, Campbell, you were somewhere. You said at a horse race. Was that it? Or no, were you in Argentina?
Correct.
Yeah, no. You were,
I've just returned from Argentina probably a couple of weeks ago, a couple of months ago. Thank God, before this whole hunter virus sort of conundrum.
Oh, yes.
That's a story for another time. Well, to touch base on it, we've always known about hunter virus. And, when I'd go hiking in the United States, you'd wear a mask and gloves and clean a cottage or a cabin you were camping in, for example, because there was virus residue. The latest one, there's an Andes subvariant that has come from South America. Traditionally, the virus would go rodents to people, and that was sort of the end of it. Whereas the Andes subvariant has the ability to go people to people. So, but yeah, that's a total other chat in itself. And I'm actually doing a fellowship at the moment that's looking at portable laboratories. But I was just doing a huge horse race called the Pass of Tears. It was across the Plateau of Death and within the Andes down in Patagonia, Argentina. And that sort of stemmed from, the huge race that you mentioned in Mongolia the Mongol Derby. So it's 1,000 kilometers. It's on Mongolian horses. It's a recreation of Genghis Khan's messaging route,
All right.
where
Yeah.
you would take a note, or a general would need to tell an army to make a logistical
Yes.
move. And there'd be horses every 30 kilometers, and the rider would gallop one horse 30 kilometers, change, and sort of do a pony express.
Right.
So back in 2012, I rode the Derby. 34 riders started. I was only one of 16 riders that finished.
Oh
The
my God.
attrition is quite high.
Yeah.
I rode it in 9 days, and it is by far one of the most challenging things I'd ever done in my life. But yeah, that social network that I met, and then I would go back every year to be one of the veterinarians afterwards. And then that led into doing another event in Argentina, and yeah, just opening a whole world of opportunity, which I
Absolutely.
think was really a keystone moment for me as such a young adult,
And
to be a part of that race.
an incredible feat, but also the Alaska dog sled race, and your time in Patagonia was the Gaucho Derby. Is that a derby? Is that how you say Gaucho?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, so the Iditarod, weirdly enough, when having younger sisters, we used to watch a lot of Disney cartoons and programs. There's a Disney movie called Balto about the famous dog sled dog that so in Alaska, I think it was in the 30s, they had a huge diphtheria outbreak.
Right.
And as the dog sled was being, phased out for more mechanized routes such as shipping trains and aircraft, they had a really bad winter, and they couldn't get any of the diphtheria antitoxin into Nome, right up, near the Arctic Circle in northern Alaska. So there was a series of dog sleds that took the antitoxin. I think it was from Nanana all the way up to Nome.
Right.
And the Iditarod is sort of a race they held annually now to salute the dogs, and they saved the population because everyone was getting quite sick. So there is a Disney film called Balto. It's a great one, and that's what the horse race the dog sled race in Alaska. And I think for me, it just resonates with being a bush kid in Australia, rather than being really hot, as it's just freezing, but there's heaps of aeroplanes.
Certainly the
there's
opposite.
No roads. It's, it is the wild, wild west.
Yeah.
Just, 20 degrees below. It's the only place where I've snapped a stethoscope where it froze rock hard and snapped.
Right.
And then obviously, yeah, Patagonia in Argentina. I've been really blessed to, work in Africa, the Middle East, Russia, South America. And I love Patagonia. And if anyone ever got the chance, to go and experience that part of the world, it is truly magical.
I've heard it's absolutely beautiful. But Campbell, now just to get on to a more serious note, you're very much an advocate for mental health. And I had read this before, but I believe there is a very high suicide rate for veterinarians. Why do you think that is, and how are you helping there?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been a vet for 16 years now, so I'm male. I'm a mixed animal vet, and I've been practicing for more than 3 years. And those are some statistical anomalies. It's predominantly female now.
Right.
Most veterinarians practice in the city, and most do small animals. I think it's a myriad of challenges that sort of compound each other and has catalyzed a alarmingly high suicide rate and attrition rate and burnout. I guess, let's start, if you're looking at leaving school, if you go and do an apprenticeship, your TAFE is heavily subsidized and you earn while you learn.
Yes.
On the other hand, if you decide to go to veterinary medicine, you might be doing 38 to 40 hours a week of, classes and practice. And then you've got to go and work on the weekends or night shift just to pay your rent.
Right.
An average veterinary degree can cost $80,000 to $100,000 in student loans alone. And then you graduate. I saw just last week in the Sydney Morning Herald about a new graduate that graduated onto $60,000 a year. I think there's a common misunderstanding that people think that veterinarians are paid highly, and it's just simply not the case. So,
and a lot of responsibility.
Correct. Yeah, you're the anaesthetist, you're the GP, you're the surgeon, you're the pharmacist,
Yes.
you're the counsellor,
Yeah.
for when those people. And unfortunately, I think Australia is a little bit unique as well. Australians, we're so privileged to have subsidised healthcare. The
Yes.
Royal Flying Doctor, to call one of those aeroplanes out in the Northern Territory, for example, a Pilatus PC-12 aircraft is about $11,000 an hour to run you. So to run.
Yes.
So just a 4-hour trip to hospital can be $40,000 to $50,000, but it's totally free. And then you go into an Australian hospital and it's totally free.
Yeah.
If you come to the veterinary clinic, we're very expensive because we've got to buy the same drugs, the same X-ray machines. We're scrutinised with the same red tape and standards. But not only do I leave university with $100,000 in student debt, I then have to buy the clinic. I have to buy all these things, and I have to cut past those costs onto people. We've seen our drugs explode by 300% in some ways.
Right.
For the human doctors, well, they don't have to buy that. The taxpayer pays.
Yes.
But for veterinary medicine, we have to pass that cost onto, the user. We are the American healthcare system. And I think, unfortunately, that predisposes vets to huge amounts of debt, long hours, burnout, and abuse from the public. Like, I've been assaulted multiple times in the workplace. I've had my private details put online. It's really horrible.
It's shocking.
It's disgusting. That
and
just by helping someone's dog, I've had someone punch me in the head, and I'm not isolated in that. That thing. And I think Australians need to understand, and the greater public, that if we look at what the federal budget was launched last night and what they want to spend on aged care, health, NDIS, veterinary science gets $0. We aren't subsidised at all, and it's becoming alarmingly expensive to provide a service, and our costs are going up and up and up. And it's becoming financially inaccessible by, average Australians to go and see the veterinarian. But we have no to little margins in that. And I think that's why a lot of vets either leave the profession for something that's more remunerative, or unfortunately they die by suicide. And unfortunately, a lot of my jobs where I go to a clinic is because someone's left, or they're dead.
It's a really it's a really, really difficult situation. And as you said, you're expected to perform miracles where miracles can't happen, and then you get abused. But Campbell, sadly, we are running out of time. Sparrow's waving through me. Bear, I just want to ask very quickly: why do you call your plane Pip?
Pip is a Piper Lance, PA-32R, so Piper, Pip for short. So.
Lovely. That's right. That's terrific. Look, we probably have to have you back later, I think, because I was going to ask you, what was the worst strip that you've ever flown into, and the hardest case you've had to treat. But can we have you back again at some stage?
I would love to come back. And as I said, I've been very fortunate to be a recipient of the Kenneth Meyer Innovation Fellowship.
Oh, right.
So I am currently developing portable PCR and laboratory platforms that we can do rabies, foot and mouth, or other tests in the bush. So
look,
it's a whole other
and your biomolecular systems as well. We need to hear more about that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'm more than happy to come and talk to people and yourself about the beautiful science that's happening in a world that can be a bit scary at the moment.
Look, that's terrific. Now, Campbell, your own webpage is at www.outbackvets.au.
Correct.
You're also on Instagram as Campbell Costello and at Dr._Cossey, I suppose.
Yes.
I should have thought of that. It's short for Costello, isn't it? Of course. And you are on LinkedIn. But Campbell, look, thank you so much for being my guest. Thank you, Sparrow, for producing. This program has been produced in the studios of 4RPH Reading Radio in Brisbane for syndication around Australia, and will be available on my YouTube channel, Lots to Chat About, with Rosemary Peterswald. But once again, Campbell, thank you, and yes, we'll definitely have you back again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Lovely. Thanks, Campbell.
Great friends and great chats. That was another Lots to Chat About with Rosemary Peterswald. Stay tuned next week for another amazing chat.